Hello YouTube, it's Caroline again today, and I know this is a little late, but I'm finally getting around to being able to film my May wrap-up. I read 9 books this month, which seems like a lot. I don't know. I read a lot more than this a couple months ago. So, I'm gonna tell you about these books. First, I read Bridget Jones' Diary. I read this for the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge, book that became a movie. I got this book for free. It takes place in the form of a diary. Most chapters begin with her weight and how many calories she ate and cigarettes she smoked and things like that. I only gave this book 3 stars. I didn't really like it that much, but it was a fast read, so I didn't regret reading it. Next, I read Adverbs by Daniel Handler. This is a book of short stories that are all an adverb, and it's a story about love. So, like, not particularly, collectively, frigidly, soundly, and they're stories about love that fit that adverb. This was pretty interesting, but not my favorite Daniel Handler book I've read. I also gave this book 3 stars. Again, I didn't regret reading it, but I was expecting it to be better than it was. I read And the Mountains Echoed by Khaled Hosseini. He also does The Kite Runner, which I think most people had to read in high school. I did anyway. And I really, really liked this book. When I looked through the Goodreads reviews, most people's biggest complaint was there was too many characters, but I didn't feel that way. They all wrapped back to each other to be one cohesive story, and I thought that was really interesting that it skipped back and forth and eventually you learned how all these characters know each other. So I would highly recommend this book. I gave it 5 stars. That's probably a 4.5, but Goodreads only works in whole stars, so I rounded up to 5. Highly recommend this book. Unnatural Creatures by Neil Gaiman and others. Neil Gaiman is the one who collected all the stories, and he wrote like 1 paragraph about them at the beginning. This was pretty interesting. Some of these are scary creatures, some of them are not scary, just not natural. They don't really exist. And a lot of these were actually pretty interesting. I wasn't expecting it to enjoy it as much as I did. There is one story I had to skip because it's about bees, and I am terrified of bees. My first memory is getting stung by a bee. I only gave this 3 stars because some of the stories were hit or miss, and it did take longer than I expected to read. But overall, I wasn't expecting to like some of these stories as much as I did. Some of them I really, really liked. Then I read Super Sad True Love Story. Now, this book says that it's one of the best book of the year from New York Times and the Washington Post and all these newspapers. And I say, that is bullshit. This book was not that good. I gave this a generous 3 stars. It's probably only 2 stars, but at the end I did have a sense of I liked that better than I thought I would have. The last maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 pages, something like that, were more interesting than like this whole chunk leading up to it. Felt like I was just forcing myself to read it a lot of the time. So 3 stars is more than it deserves. It is definitely not worthy of being on the best books of the year list. Then I finished The Natural History of Dragons, which is a book I had read, I don't know, 25% of, and then put it down and forgot about it and never felt like picking it back up. I finally did pick it back up, and I really, really liked this. The beginning is kind of slow, and reads like a, you know, James, who's James? I don't know. It reads like a J.R. Tolkien novel kind of at the beginning. It's that kind of style, but it's really good. I really liked it once I got back into it. I finished it in about maybe 2 days once I got back into it. For the first couple chapters, I felt like I was forcing myself. I gave this a 4-star rating, and it definitely feels like a solid 4 stars. I liked some of the pictures of dragons, and I liked that it really felt kind of like her memoir. Like, she was describing everything that happened to them and the important parts, and it really read like a memoir even though it's fictional. Then I read Wonderstruck by Brian Selznick, who also does The Invention of Hugo Cabret, which I love. This book was so good. it has all these pictures like this. Tons of pictures, which makes it so interesting. The story was good. This one actually has more story than Hugo Cabret did. The pages are pretty much all full like this. Hugo Cabret had a lot of 2 sentences on each page. And it's about deaf kids, and it's just so good. I highly recommend this book. 5 stars, no question. Even though it's a huge book, you can read it in a day because there's a ton of pictures. And it's touching, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it's so good. Then I read The Kill Order by James Dashner. This is the prequel to the Maze Runner series, and I only gave it 3 stars. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. I wanted to learn more about Teresa and like just the whole history of how it happened, and it was just the story of someone when the flare first started and they're getting infected and losing their loved ones and things like that. And it just wasn't what I wanted it to be. I didn't feel emotionally attached to the characters really at all. At the end, I did think it was an enjoyable read, but it was just kind of like blah. So I only gave this one 3 stars as well. And finally, I read Mystic River by Dennis Lehane. This is not my favorite Dennis Lehane novel, but his books are really, really good. I grew up in the Boston area, going to Boston a lot. So I'm familiar with a lot of the areas that he talks about in his books, which makes it like just one step better. But his books are just so good. This, like I said, this isn't my favorite book he's ever written, but I would highly recommend this book if you like mysteries, crime novels. This is a crime novel. My favorite novel of his is Shutter Island, which I will talk about in my June wrap-up because I just finished. And I've read several other of his novels. I have maybe 5 on my bookshelf, and they're all really good. I highly recommend them. This is a standalone. It's not the Kenzie Gerano series. So you can pick this one up and not worry you've missed anything, not worry there's parts left to talk about. So I highly recommend this book. I also gave this one 5 stars. Probably more accurately, again, a 4.5, but really, really good nonetheless. Read it. Okay, that's all of the books I read in May. If you read any really good books, let me know down below, and I will see you again soon. Bye!